All right, here we are, and we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 20, and we're going to try to do something a little bit different, not a lot different, just a little. We're going to treat this as maybe a 2 or 3 session series. And if you think that we can't sustain that, you haven't been here very long, because I'm sure we can do that more. But here's my question. This is the question we're going to try to answer during this time. And you all know the answer because we have Bible verses that tell us the answer. However, I think there are times where we seem to suspend the answer that we know for various situations that might seem to call for it, And this is the question: is it ever right to lie? Like, for example, in the case where your life is at stake, or your family's life is at stake, or you're in the service of the military, or you're a spy, or you're a policeman that has been tasked to find out, to catch a criminal. Is it ever right to lie? That's the question we're going to ask, okay? And we're going to do 3 case studies in the life of David. The first one we'll cover today. And what I'd like to do is after we've done the 3 studies, I would like to have an interview, basically, with David, and we'll bring Jonathan as a witness. And we're going to ask him some questions about, why they chose the particular courses of action they chose. And since they're now in heaven and have, I believe they're both in heaven, and have perfect testimonies and probably perfect answers at this point, then they can give us very objective and truthful answers that we might be able to learn something from. So how does that sound?
Sounds a little bit like hearsay to me, what do you think?
So I'm glad we have a lawyer here to tell us the definition of why and is, and because what is it actually a lie? So I'll have to refer to our legal counsel.
So let's start in chapter 20. Now I'm going to do the best. I'm torn because I would love, because for sake of time, to tell you the story of chapter 20. I could read it to you and then sort of reinterpret it back to you. That'll take a long time. I'll probably do a mix of the two. Okay, is that all right? Because otherwise we will never have time for commentary. The chapter is fairly long. There's 42 verses. So let me remind you of where we were in chapter 19. We had David in chapter 19 had fled. Saul had thrown the javelin at him, and so David had gone to Naioth, or however you want to say it, Naioth, maybe. And this is an interesting town because it's really just a cluster. The word Naioth, it's just referring to a cluster of buildings. And this is a place where Samuel had apparently set up some kind of a school, like a prophecy school. And there is something really special about this place because, as we saw in chapter 19, when Saul sent out 3 waves of messengers to this place, every time they got close, they were overtaken by, I don't know what it was, something in the water, the ambience of the place, or probably more likely it's the Lord and the Spirit of the Lord. They started prophesying. And so Saul, in frustration, goes himself, and the last thing we see is in chapter 19, the last verse, is he has basically stripped himself of his outer garments and is laying down naked all the whole day and all that night, almost as though he's in a trance. And he's prophesying, and the people around observing this are saying, is Saul also a prophet? So David, who is here, flees back. And that's where we pick up the story in chapter 20. So David now comes back and appears to Jonathan. And Jonathan is his ally, his friend, close friend. And what's interesting about this, if you look at the different commentaries on this chapter, it's interesting what people choose to shine the light on in the chapter, what they choose to focus on. And depending on what you choose to focus on is going to determine a lot about what you're going to be emphasizing. A lot of them emphasize the friendship and the value of this loyalty between the two. There's also a covenant in here that's going to be we're going to see between Jonathan and David and David that he's going to agree to in terms of protection for Jonathan's family. There's a lot of things in here that we could talk about. And there's really 3 different points of view that are involved here that are, I would say, they're pretty mutually exclusive. David is just trying to survive. He's in a survival mode. And he's trying to find out, does he even have a home in this kingdom anymore? Jonathan he's stuck between, he's got a loyalty problem because he's trying to fit, he's as a good kid, he's trying to believe his dad and, give his dad the benefit of the doubt. And at the same time, he's got this wonderful friend. And he's going to be forced to, in a way, choose between these 2 loyalties that he has. Because when push comes to shove and you have to decide, you have to decide. And then you've got obviously Saul, who reveals in this chapter that he really wants his own son to be the next king. And we'll see that. And so you've got mutually exclusive goals that are in this chapter. So let's start out. David fled from Naioth and Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father that he seeketh my life?" I think this speaks to his humility. He's not presuming that he did nothing wrong. He's not even saying that. He just wants to know, if I've done something wrong, I need to know so I can come and make it right, so we can correct the situation, and I can be welcome back here. And I believe that shows that he is in a humble position. And he said unto him, "God forbid," this is Jonathan speaking, "thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." So Jonathan basically tries to appease the situation. No, you're overreacting here. And Jonathan is acting in good faith for his father. And David sware moreover and said, "Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes." And he saith, "Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth," and when you say truly as the Lord liveth, which is God is very much alive, and as thy soul liveth, you're basically putting 2 stakes in the ground and saying this is true. Okay? "There is but a step between me and death." Then Jonathan said unto David, "Whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee." So Jonathan obviously is, if nothing else, impressed by David's demeanor, his urgency, his insistence, and he just says, "Okay, how can I help?" And David said unto Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon." Now, understand that the new moon meant that there would be a feast, and the feast is usually going to last a couple days, usually apparently about at least 2 days and into the 3rd day. But at the evening of the 3rd day, that would be unwinding. David is targeting that 3rd day, basically, to find out an assessment of what the king's true disposition about him is. And David he's not trying to convince himself. He already knows the king's trying to kill him. What he's trying to do is convince Jonathan that the king is trying to kill him. Because he needs an ally here, and if God's called him to become the king, he's got to figure out how to move forward. But he's got a problem because the true authority in the situation, as far as the king goes, is trying to kill him. So he comes up, and this is what he says. This is what I want you to consider. Is this approach appropriate for a person in this situation? David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go that I may hide myself" where? In the field, right? In the field unto the 3rd day at even. That's the evening of the 3rd day. So where's he going to be? He's going to be in the field. "If thy father at all miss me, then say, David say, David earnestly asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, for there's a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. And if he say thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him. So David's telling Jonathan, basically, you're going to find out your answer. You're going to know whether I'm telling you the truth or not by that, how he responds to that question. Verse 8, therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee, notwithstanding, if there be in me any iniquity, slay me thyself, for why shouldst thou bring me to thy father? Basically what he's saying is, if you think I'm conspiring against the kingdom, if you think I have evil against the king or the kingdom, just kill me yourself. You know? I don't think I've done anything wrong, and I want you to know my heart, I have no malice intended here. Jonathan said, far be it from thee, for if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee, then would I not tell thee? So see, Jonathan's still not buying this. Then David said to Jonathan, who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answer thee roughly? So now David, what he's after here is, how am I going to know? I mean, this whole thing could go down and your father could turn against you, and I'll never know. I'll never find out. So Jonathan, thinking on his feet very quickly, said, let's take a walk, basically. He says, come, and let's go out to the field. And they went out, both of them, into the field. And you all know the story. You know what happened. Jonathan comes up with a plan here. But what's interesting in this plan is Jonathan is doing way more than just coming up with a plan to get David the news. He's getting ready to start to indicate that if this is true, remember me, or especially remember my family, because it's not going to go well with me if you're right. And he's starting now to have to choose who he's going to be loyal to here. He's now starting to make that choice. So Jonathan, he says in verse 14, and thou shalt not only while yet I live show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not. Now, why would he say this? Jonathan knows that God has protected David, and all of David's enemies have been taken out by the Lord. You're going to see a reflection of that in the language that comes up here. He says, for also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. I don't want to be against you. I do not want to be on the wrong side of this. And Jonathan made a covenant with David, with the house of David, saying, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. And Jonathan caused David to swear again, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and thou shalt remain by the stone Ezel. I actually looked up the word Ezel, what it means. And it means here, I'll just tell you. It means it means a separation. Well, I think the reason it came to mean a separation is because this stone was chosen, because they're getting ready to separate. But before that, it actually meant the stone that showeth the way, which I think is interesting that he chose that particular stone as a symbol of, we're going to find out the way we need to go here. Now, I'm going to stop here and ask for any comments so far.
I looked at verse 4. I was interested that Jonathan made this vow that whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. So that doesn't seem like a wise thing to do, to promise ahead of time. So that didn't seem like a good promise.
Okay.
And
interesting.
Also, it says, trust in the Lord and don't lean on your own understanding. So I reckon the question is this God's will? Did God want David to have Jonathan say this? Is that the will of the Lord? Or is this David leaning on his own understanding? Not because we don't see what God would have done had they not done this. We only see David's I don't see David crying out to God and say, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? How do you want me to act? Instead, he comes up with his own plan, gets someone else involved, which has consequences. So, I don't know, just because David does it doesn't mean that's a... Anyway, I was wondering if he's trusting in the Lord or is he leaning on his own understanding?
Very good, very good. Okay, Bob,
To answer your question
go ahead.
that you asked at the beginning, in this particular situation, to kind of tag on what Brother David said is that you asked if it was ever right to lie. And I think as a child of God, that if we don't really understand, we trust the Lord in every situation, he will give us an out, so to speak, so that we don't have to lie. In this particular situation, I think it's just like what Dave said. I've often thought, why did David say that when he knew that it was a bold-faced lie that he was going to tell his father? I don't find anywhere in my Bible, at least, where God ever condones lying. And I think that anytime that we get into a situation where we think it is okay, it's because we're taking the matters in our own hand and trying to solve the situation ourselves instead of trusting and waiting on the Lord. That's when we get into problems,
Right.
regardless of whether it's that or anything else.
Right.
I also think Jesus is a good example. He didn't answer every question. You don't have to answer the person's question. Jesus said, I'm not going to tell you. So we don't have to answer the question. We don't have to lie, but we don't have
Have to
to.
answer the question, right?
Yeah. Or we can, like he did, turn it around on them. And you don't have to let the bully, the evil person, win.
Right.
Well, sometimes withholding truth can be a lie if you withhold truth, but I think that what it comes down to is whether you have an intent to deceive.
Well, okay, so somebody comes into your house and says, let's assume you have a family, and says, okay, I'm here to kill your family. Are they here?
You just hit on the universal problem that Kant had. Kant had the theory that you should create a law that you would want it to be universal.
What was that word you said?
Kant, the philosopher. And people devastated his theory because they said, well, if you knock on their door and a crazy man wants to come in and kill your family, or you get a lie. But I've heard the anecdote on, I don't know if it's true, of Corrie ten Boom and her sister hiding the Jewish refugees. And the Nazi soldiers came in and they said, where are they? And her sister didn't want to lie, and she said they're under the table. And they, of course, looked and they weren't under there, but what she meant was they were under the floor beneath the table. And she did not lie, and they actually never found the Jews, and they were taken, obviously, to the camp. And just out of her desire, I think it was Betsy, was her sister's name? Her desire not to lie, God still protected them despite her telling the truth, and in essence blinded the soldiers' eyes. So I don't know, in situations, God, I think Brother Paul has a good point. God makes an out.
That's interesting. Corrie ten Boom, though, lied. They asked her,
Yeah,
is this the only radio you have? And no, there's no other radio. So she had the other radio. That's how they were able to find out all this. Yeah, that's a...
And you get into the larger problem of when you say intent to deceive. I mean, what is camouflage for a soldier?
Yeah,
It's basically saying, I'm not here, right?
Yeah, plus
There's
as-
lots of things that are a deceit in warfare. It's full of deceit.
Plus, as a person in a situation like that, really exercising their will at that point, I mean, you essentially have removed their will when you put them in a situation where you're forcing them to choose between their family and making a statement. You're not making a statement of your own free will. You're under duress.
There's actually a Supreme Court case where they came down, and I could cite it. I just didn't take the note down at the time. But where it gives permission for police officers to lie in the duty of their job, basically to accomplish their job. So we have confusing crosswinds here, on this topic. My purpose is not to stir up a bunch of stuff to make it all muddy for everybody. My purpose is to cause us to think this through. Because there's going to be times where my question was, is it ever right to lie? What's sort of we're told to do, only that which is right. So we're actually saying the right answer in this particular scenario is to tell a lie. That's the assumption when I ask, is it right to lie? Okay, if it's not right, then we shouldn't do it, right? According to Scripture. So we have to be able to defend that it's actually right, and that would be in opposition to everything the Bible says that I can find that says that we should not lie. Lie not. And it even one of the things in the list in the book of Revelation, and all liars shall find their part in talking about hell there, right? That's the last one in that list. Along with all the idolaters and the abominable, all those that are great sinners as liars.
And assuming that this is wrong, what David did, that's not the only thing he did wrong. He killed something, had somebody killed, and he committed adultery. So he's definitely not a good example. Just because he did it, that doesn't mean just because David did it, I wouldn't say that was right.
Yeah, Dave.
Are we saying that David lied when he said, I'm going to go over to Bethlehem?
Well, he's asking, in this case, he's asking Jonathan to lie, basically. So he's giving Jonathan advice to lie. That's what's
Telling him that he's gone to Bethlehem?
Yeah.
How do we know that wasn't an annual?
Well, apparently there is an annual feast here, but he's saying on the one hand, I'm going to the field, and on the other hand, tell the king I'm going to Bethlehem. And then if you have, if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt here, wait till we get to the next chapter. He's going to lie again, and then in the next chapter, there's two more times where it's coming up, and what we're seeing. And this is what I want you to think about in the whole context of this thing. This is when we do our interview. This is David who killed Goliath, David who was unafraid to take on the armies of the Philistines. What's going to happen in chapter 21 is David is going to become fearful of a king. And it says that. We start seeing his trust in God to protect him starting to unwind right as God has complete control over Saul. Saul's prophesying. Saul is unable to come after David. And right as God is doing that for David, David is all of a sudden starting to resort to his own ways. That's where things are going. And so the question is can we see that, David's actions are a slow spiral here to where, had he not taken these courses of action, one thing kind of leads to the other. Talk about lies. You say one white lie leads to the next, right? Until you're in a terrible situation. Jonathan's life is going to be threatened, as we'll see in this chapter. Let's continue on with the chapter. I'm going to do a little bit of summarizing here. But they come up with a plan about he's going to shoot the arrow, and he's going to tell the kid. Basically, the symbol is if I say the arrow's this way, then David, that means it's okay to come in. Everything's safe. But if I say the arrow's further away, then you need to get out of here. It's not safe. And there was never any intent for the two of them to be seen in this situation. Okay, that was the plan. We're going to see how that goes out the window pretty quick. Okay, so the next day, it's the new moon. Saul doesn't say anything. He says, let's look at verse 26. Nevertheless, Saul spake. Let's go to 25. Let's set the scene here. The king is sitting on his seat near the wall. And Jonathan gets up. Abner's sitting next to the king. And David, presumably, should be sitting on the other side of the king. And that place is empty. And nothing has been said. This is verse 25. 26. Nevertheless, what's that? Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought, something has befallen him. He's not clean. Surely he's not clean. And so he thinks that there's some, he's not been able to come to this holy sacrifice meal type of thing because of the Jewish laws, the Hebrew laws. So the next day comes, verse 27, it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty, and Saul said unto Jonathan, Wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to me, neither yesterday nor today? Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. Is that a true statement? Yes, he did say that, but is that the truth?
So
Is he telling the king the truth here?
Well, and it's not that I'm in disagreement with that, but what if that, when he says go out, what if at that time David's intention was going to Bethlehem? If Saul was after him, then potentially he could have gone to do exactly what he... Now, there's other things that I think that are clear, like when he feigned himself to be mad when he wasn't. That was
Right, and before that, when he goes in, we'll see in the next chapter, when he goes to the priest and he says, he's like, where's all your men? Oh, I'm on a special mission for the king, I'm incognito, that is a story. Fully fabricated story. Well, anyway, let's stay with this one.
So-
We'll get to the next one next week.
So it does bring up a point, like he put all the blame on David. He said, this is what David said. I'm just relaying what he told me to tell you.
Right.
I'm just a messenger.
Now, look, hey, listen, gentlemen, I am not here to throw David under the bus. I'm not.
No, I think that God reveals his flaws. But I tell you what, you turn to the Psalm and you realize really what kind of a repentant heart David had in asking forgiveness.
Right. And I'm not denying any of that. In fact, if we were to turn to some of the Psalms, I think that we see David's heart about he knows what's right, and he shows us by his words that he knows what's right. Go ahead, Bob.
I think everything that God allows to be revealed to us through His Word about men in the Bible are for a purpose, and if no other purpose is served, it's just to show us that they are men, they're human, just like we are. They have their faults and failures, and it helps to encourage us that we're not alone, so to speak. When we have our problems and our difficulties, that even though someone as great as Paul and David and other great men of the Bible, Joseph and Abraham, they had their faults and their difficulties. And so that helps to encourage me that, look, hey, at times when I falter, look, God's no respecter of persons.
Right.
And so that helps me to understand. So I think that he lets us see this side of these great men that were so close to God. So it tells us, look, hey, you have the ability to be as close to me as these men were, even though you have your faults and failures, because they also have theirs.
Right. And see, this is the thing, is when we're following Scripture and we're reading, we have to interpret it properly. Because if we interpret it one way, it's like, well, David did it, so it's okay for me to do. Right? We could come to that conclusion.
That's the danger. That is a great danger.
And so the
people think that lying is justified because of passages of Scripture.
Exactly. And so what we have to do is figure this out. We're told the honest truth of what happened. The Holy Spirit's telling us exactly what happened, right? But we've got to come away from it with the right conclusions.
Amen.
Okay? That's what we're trying to do.
Amen.
And that's why I'm not shying away from the controversy of it. Because we've got to think it through for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Andrew.
I just want to give Saul a little bit of credit. In verse 25 and 26, the first day when David's absent, at least the Bible doesn't record that Saul was like upset or angry or anything. He actually just assumes David is being righteous under the law and is ceremonially unclean and not coming to the feast because of that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Good point.
to give Saul at least a little bit of credit. Even though the next
He loses it. He loses it.
there's a 180.
One virtuous moment.
Yeah, that's right. Also to David's testimony.
Right.
for being
Right. yeah, Saul just assumes David's being righteous
Yeah.
in what he's doing.
Right, exactly. So what happens next is Jonathan is relaying the story, and so he says, verse 29, and he said, "Let me go, I pray thee, for our family." Okay, now coming back over to here to whoever it was.
He's just he's relaying a message.
He's relaying a message. Now, is this the truth? Is this is this the right story? For our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there.
Oh, he added something.
Is that true? And now, if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. Therefore, that means that's why he cometh not unto the king's table. That's the reason. Is that true?
No, so he did more than just give a message.
Okay, so Saul's anger now is kindled against Jonathan, and he said unto him, and he's not being very nice here at all. "Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman." So he must have a little marital issue going on here too. It's all starting to come out here, right? "Do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness?" And now he lets a little bit of interesting too. These next two verses tell us that he wants Jonathan to follow him.
So he
to
has
be the next
Jonathan's
king.
best interest. He's saying, "I'm just caring about you. I'm trying to."
Well, he's
Think
trying
about
to,
your future.
whether it's Jonathan's best interest or he wants to perpetuate his name.
Okay.
You decide that. For Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. He said unto him, I read that, verse 31. "For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore, now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die." And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, "Wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done?" And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. This is the first time that Jonathan knew that what David had been telling him was the truth, that he was correct. He had assessed the situation accurately. And what's interesting about this now...
Say that sentence again.
I think this is the first moment where Jonathan realized that his father really did intend to kill David. I don't think he had really believed it up to this point. And what I find this interesting about this is Jonathan seems like such a very loving, devoted, give the other people the benefit of the doubt kind of a person. But when he finds out that his father truly wants to kill David, I think he does something here that's very uncharacteristic of him. He gets really, really angry. I mean, this is crossing even his line. Okay? And look what he does. He says, and so Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and did eat no meat the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. This is where I think Jonathan, he is stewing, and he's realizing, I have to make a choice here. And he's going to choose David. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and we have this event with the arrow and the shooting and all that. And now, here's what's interesting. Instead of David going like he's supposed to, and instead of Jonathan returning with the lad back to the city, verse 40, Jonathan gave his artillery, that's drew back his bow and arrows with him from home. And I said, "Did you know your bow and arrows is called artillery?" And Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad and said unto him, "Go carry them to the city." And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south. And at this point, Jonathan has thrown caution to the winds. He's like, I don't care if we're seen together. I mean, the plan was we weren't going to be seen together, but I'm getting ready to say goodbye to my best friend on earth. And for this, I may For all I know, I'm going to be dead soon myself. And so that's why he had that covenant established before, because just in case now it looks like this is going to play out. And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south and fell on his face to the ground and bowed himself 3 times, and they kissed one another and wept one with another until David exceeded. And I noticed that little phrase, until David exceeded. It seems as though they were both torn up. But Jonathan regains his composure. David, the poet, David, the musician, David, yes, he's a strong warrior, but he seems to be the more emotional of the two. Is just so overtaken in the emotion that Jonathan has to kind of say, okay, Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. And so you do have this very powerful story of their relationship. And it's not wrong to shine the light on the strength of this relationship, on the strength of this loyalty. But you've got some really difficult situations here. These are men fighting for their lives. This wasn't a time when, everything was all civil. If you went against the king, you're dead, basically. Ed, you look like you wanted to say something. Okay.
I don't know why Jonathan didn't go with David. It's like, well, my father just tried to kill me, so why am I going back to him?
Well, I think when you're the king's son, I mean, you'd not be allowed to survive. You just wouldn't.
That's right. Competition.
You just wouldn't be. Yeah. I mean, but that's the difficulty of it. I mean, honestly, where is he safer? What does David have to do to protect him? David's on the run. He's a fugitive.
Well, I know. But David does survive because of the Lord. And Jonathan knows he's going to be the next king.
Then when we get David and Jonathan here, we'll ask Jonathan that question. Because I don't know. But you know what's neat is when we get to heaven, we can ask these questions, maybe, right?
In Samuel...
You really think it's what's going to be on your mind when you get to heaven?
Hey, you know what? I've been thinking about this for a long time, Bob, for at least, the last year. I've been thinking, if I decide I want to go take David for a walk for about 100 years, I'll have time to do that. And he'll have time to give it to me. No, it's not going to be the only thing I'm going to be focused on at all. But you know what? We've got lots of time. And some things I just... Maybe I won't be curious about it.
Maybe eventually one day down to eternity somewhere.
Just, there are certain things you want to do when you get to heaven, and there's certain things I want to do.
I want to see my Savior first.
Amen. Amen.
And I'll talk to you, Chuck. You said I don't have time right now. I'm going over here. Hey, 1 Samuel 13, everybody knows that David's going to be the king. Saul knows for 100%. In 1 Samuel 13, when Samuel told Saul, it's super clear. It says, this is it. So Saul's in active rebellion against God because he's not accepting this direct word from God, and so he didn't repent. So everyone knows it's going to happen. For sure, it might happen. Saul knows it, Jonathan knows it, and David, they all know it's going to happen. God's going to make it happen. So David's not going to die. So David should have known that.
So let me ask you a question. I think you're a good person to ask. What do you think? Do you think Jonathan is right to go against his father, the king, given that his father's the authority?
So Jonathan could have said, I don't have to intervene. We already know that this is going to happen. We have a promise that's, I don't have to intervene and take matters into my own hands. God has already got it under control.
It's better to obey God
than
than man.
And that's what Samuel told Saul. He said it's better to obey than to sacrifice. Samuel's already told Saul that message once. So they don't have anything to worry about or be afraid. They're not trusting God. Saul is not repenting and accepting Samuel's direct word from God.
We have the benefit of how things played out. But when things are going in real time, it's like the frog in the water. You can't always discern where things are going, and therefore you don't always know what you should be doing. Bob?
Let's take something that'll be more, let's say I'm in church, and God forbid, but my father walks in and says he's going to kill my pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think I'm going to stand up for at that time? My father or my pastor?
Stand up for pastor.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand for the man of God.
Yeah. Right.
Against my father.
Right.
So, Jonathan was kind of in a situation where he knew about this time, the circumstance of his father, but he also knew that David was going to be king. He also knew that David had been anointed by God to be the king. So Jonathan had a certain amount of spiritual knowledge from the Lord himself. He made that decision because he felt in his heart that it was the right decision that the Lord would want him to make.
Right. But do you see how between even godly men in this room that we have slightly different takes on what should be done? We have, we're not even disagreeing with each other. We're just talking. And yet we have certain stances that are different. And we have Dave saying, well, maybe Jonathan should have just not committed one way or the other, because that way he's not bucking up against his authority. And we have Bob saying, well, it's clear what God wants to have happen here, and he just needs to go with God, And so,
Well, you look at the life of Jonathan, and as far as almost a perfect individual, you find nothing wrong with him as far as that is concerned. But I think Jonathan knew his father in ways was not following the Lord. Like when they were going to battle, and he said, okay, no one's going to eat until, I've defeated my enemies. And Jonathan took the rod, and Jonathan didn't hear it. He didn't disobey the command, but he put it to his mouth. But then that was a pretty strong rebuke later on when he said, if we were allowed to eat, then there would have been a much greater victory than this.
right, that's right. Yeah.
So Jonathan was extremely godly.
Yeah.
I tell you what, that's the kind of friend I would.
Yeah.
I think all of us in this room.
Yeah. Amen. So let's just ask the question. Was Jonathan? Do you feel like Jonathan took the right course of action in this story, as far as what he told his father and how he went about that? What do y'all have an opinion?
Well, I think you're right. I don't think it's in any way, in any manner, justified to lie.
Okay. So see,
That opens the door.
even though we admire people, we still have room for improvement, don't we? And I think that's true for all of us. Okay, we may have the best of intentions, but I think that what God wants us to do is trust Him.
Amen. That's good.
And not lean into our own understanding. And I think these verses that come from the Holy Spirit out David's pen and mouth is from these kinds of lessons that he learned along the way. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not into thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct thy path. I think that comes from a voice of lessons learned. Bob?
It's just that, we have to be careful not to get our eyes on men and to keep our eyes on the Lord, And a lot of times my children ask me, Dad, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? I said, your dad cares nothing about leaving a legacy. Only Jesus. Then my kids remember nothing else.
Amen.
If they remember Jesus. I said, if you expect your dad to leave a lot of money, you're going to be disappointed. But Jesus, if I can somehow, every second from them, live for Jesus.
Amen.
That's the only legacy.
Amen.
I feel it.
What can we, I've got a couple minutes left here. I want to ask you a question. What can we do? Does anybody have any suggestions on what we can do when we're torn about and we're tempted to because we want a good outcome, we don't tell the truth. Or in some cases, we just, I'm not saying you can't not speak like Jesus did not speak. I'm saying, but sometimes we purposefully allow someone to be deceived by how we answer about what the truth is. What can we do to keep ourselves, to guard ourselves against that in the moment when we're tempted? Sometimes it just comes so so naturally almost. Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of like when your wife's getting ready for church on Sunday morning, and she asks you how to take her outfit up, and you say, "Oh, that looks great." You tie your mouth.
We're being recorded.
Well, you want to make her feel good, right?
That's a life-threatening statement, right? I think under distress.
Can't you just say, "Well, I plead the fifth"?
You could say it's not the worst thing.
Just saying.
Change yourself.
I let you.
We know that Jesus was always in charge of the situation. He would, as we know, answer a question with a question. And we can also
That's good. That's good.
just start praying or singing out loud and change the focus, or say, "Let me think about that." We don't have to answer, as I think Dave said here, so that they're not in control of the moment. We can change the moment.
Right. Amen. So, Bob, that help you when your wife asks you about the dress? You say,
Start singing.
Start singing.
How many times have the men said that?
Or let me think about that.
Oh, Bob, you should have said. Hey, Bob, you should have said. How do you think my outfit looks?
In this situation, they were trying to get to a point. They were trying to understand an issue. David wanted Jonathan to know that King Saul was
Right.
against him.
Yes.
So, how would they have done this without a little scheme they came up with? How would
See,
they
that's a
have
great
done that?
question, and that's the kind of thing that we could explore
I mean, we have a situation here,
to make
tell
the
us how we should have
exercise
done it.
useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, that's one of the things I was going to point out, at least not necessarily taking a position, but just sort of like a law professor, just asking, just to explore the contours of this issue. This is a situation where they're not lying. They're telling. Yes, it's an untruth, but what they're doing is their intent is to test Saul. It's not to deceive Saul. It's to test something. I mean, whether that changes it, I don't know. That's the question. Does it change it? But they're not. Now it does get different when he goes in and he acts like he's insane with the Philistines and stuff like that. That's a lack of trust in God. But here, it's not. They're not doing this out of. It's not out of fear. They're doing this. They're doing it. David's doing it to test Saul, to show Jonathan something about Saul that he otherwise is not going to believe.
But the issue is not. The issue is not. And I'm not arguing against you. I'm just posing this since you framed it that way. The issue is not was the motive from fear, but the motive was to test. The issue is the Bible talks about that we are not to lie, and it doesn't give us what the motive can be
So it's
or not.
the method they use.
Right, but our discussion has been in the context of
Right.
fear, and I wanted to distinguish that.
Right.
I think it's good.
But my question about that comes be, if Jonathan went in and told Saul the truth, would he not got the same reaction?
Well,
I
this
mean,
is
Saul still got angry because
Yeah.
David wasn't there because he wanted to try to kill him. So, I mean, he'd have got angry and Jonathan would have seen the same reaction.
for those who think that Jonathan and David were wrong by what they did, then come up with a better way. That's what you should do. Okay, you should come up with a better. See, it's easy for us to, and I'm not trying to sit on both sides of the fence here. I'm just trying to make this practical. Okay, if we're going to criticize them, then we've got to have a better answer, because when it happens to us, we're going to have a better answer.
Like at work,
Okay.
if I want to know what my boss thinks about me, maybe the best thing is for me to go to my boss and humble myself and ask him, is there a problem with what I did today? So a lot of times communicating directly to the other person, maybe not with the king, maybe that's different, but maybe the best thing to do is ask the person directly in a humble way than to ask somebody else, what do you think they think about me?
Let me tell you what Wiersbe says.
One point here on this. Back in chapter 19, Jonathan does confront his father. Jonathan says in verse 4, Jonathan spoke good of David to Saul, his father. Let not the king sin against the servant David, because he hath not sinned against thee. And for he hath put his life in his hand. So he's talking to, and then Saul says, let's see, this rejoice, wherefore when wilt thou sin against innocent blood to slay David without cause? And Saul hearkened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, as the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. And so he's already lied to Jonathan. Jonathan has this background of his dad saying, I don't have anything against David. And then over here, David says, yes, there is. And so, how do you resolve that? How do you say,
well, even in the defense of Saul, remember this, that he would have this continual evil spirit that was troubling him. Mm-hmm. And he could have meant exactly what he said. He said, okay, I'm not going to do it now. Mm-hmm. But then that evil spirit troubled him again. Mm-hmm. Does an evil spirit every once in a while trouble us more at one time than another time? And so...
and what you're suggesting here, though, is that Bob says, well, why didn't he just go out and ask him? Well, he already did.
Yeah, that's
Bob
true.
Bob says, well, he goes up and says, well, David is not here because, and
He didn't want to be here.
he didn't want to be here.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I mean, Saul would react.
Or
some way.
he's afraid you're going to kill him. How about that?
he's already said, he's already said he wasn't going to kill him.
You're still going to get your answer, right?
But I'm saying, if he had said, David's not here because he don't want to be here, he would have still got the same reaction from Saul.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
So you have to have some kind of test.
It's easier for us to play Monday morning quarterback. Sit back and see it. I'm not criticizing what them to say. You just asked.
That's right.
There's no way. I was saying no.
That's
way
right.
to be here. Just say,
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
he's not here because he don't want to be here.
Absolutely. We're out of time, but let me just share with what a sentence or two from what Wiersbe has to say. He says this is tough. David's speech to Jonathan suggests self-centeredness and impatience. How much better it would have been had these two friends prayed together instead of hatching their scheme. Jonathan lied to his father about David's whereabouts, but he had to wait a few days to see how the matter would end. Meanwhile, he and David made a covenant together. Well, basically, because of this, Jonathan's life is put in jeopardy, and Saul throws the javelin at Jonathan, and the implication is that had they not done that, Jonathan would not have put himself in that situation. But that's a godly man, and that's a godly opinion, and I'm not sure, who to. Both of you, go ahead, whatever.
Go ahead.
You go first because mine goes with the song.
Okay. One of the problems we have is that we're born in the South.
I got you.
I have the wonderful privilege to be married to a German, Gisela, and Gisela will be very forthright and honest and will tell you the truth. And at first, that's difficult in our marriage because it's like, I can't believe you're saying that. And especially when we're around friends, I can't believe you're saying that. You don't say that. But yet she's taught me the importance of fearing God more than fearing man. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying go out there and blow everyone out of the waters. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not saying that. But she will side, will tell them the truth.
She's transparent.
Oh. No doubt, boys, no doubt. And I love my wife, and I stand here and I praise her.
Amen.
Because she's taught me.
Amen.
And I've said, you know what? That's what I want to be. That's what I want to be. You know, and I might hurt feelings, and I might, you know, but I've been able at the end of the day say, you know, I stand right. That's my definition of right.
Thank you for
Hey,
that.
Chuck, there's one little verse that we use in our family a lot. It's speak the truth in love. And then we go over it. It doesn't just say speak the truth. Speak the truth in love. So that we keep reminding ourselves of that verse in our family.
Sometimes a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right?
One word about the South. South is the way of living. North is just direction.
The pastor, which is
Pastor has something to
I
say.
think that the great caution is here is Proverbs 6:16 and 17 says that lying is an abomination. It's the second abomination, and it's never justified. It's justifiable to lie. And the caution is that we different individuals can take this portion of Scripture and say it's okay for me to lie. And I think we have to get in our heads it is never appropriate to lie.
Right.
Amen.
So everybody, as we live this week, measure your words, you know, against what we know the Bible teaches. Go ahead, Andy.
Psalm 32, 5-8. I acknowledge my sin unto, this is David speaking. I acknowledge my sin unto thee, and mine iniquity have I not hid. I said, I will confess my transgressions unto the Lord, and thou forgavest the iniquity of my sin. Selah. For this shall everyone that is godly pray unto thee at a time when thou mayest be found. Surely in the floods of great waters they shall not come nigh unto him. Thou art my hiding place. Thou shalt preserve me from trouble. Thou shalt compass me about with songs of deliverance. Selah.
Amen.
I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. Just a reminder that even though David did the wrong thing, he knew what the right thing was. So we're going to sing number 416, Hiding in Thee.
Did you hear what that last verse is? And God will guide you with his eye.
Yeah. Yeah.
416.
Think about that.
Amen. 4:16. Here you go. Thank you. 4:16.
Yep. We're going to sing the third verse of this today, Hiding in Thee. How often